All right, let's talk about a testing strategy that I promise you is a complete game changer if you're working with microservices. It's called consumer-driven contract testing. And if you get this right, you're going to put yourself and your team way ahead of the curve. So, does this whole scene feel a little too real? You're stuck, just waiting for this massive, super brittle end-to-end test suite to finish, only for it to fail because some other team changed something tiny and completely unrelated. It's a huge bottleneck, it's frustrating, and honestly, there's just a much, much smarter way to do this. I mean, just look at the contrast here. On the left, you've got the old way. We call it dependency hell. One team can't move because they're waiting on another. But on the right, that's the smart way. You've got independent teams moving fast, getting stable feedback, and pushing out confident, low-risk releases. That's the world that CDC testing really opens up for you. So how do we get there? Well, it all boils down to this really simple but incredibly powerful idea: creating a contract that everyone can actually trust. Let's break down what that really means. So, what is consumer-driven contract testing really? Put simply, it's a way to prove that your API, what we call the provider, is perfectly compatible with what its consumers, like your front-end app or another service, actually expect from it. And the most important part, you get this solid guarantee without having to run those painfully slow, flaky end-to-end tests. To make this crystal clear, let's use an analogy. I want you to just picture any appliance, maybe a new blender you just bought. It needs power to work, right? In our world, that blender is the consumer. It's a service that absolutely needs data from somewhere else to do its job. And that wall socket, well, that's your provider. It's the API that's supplying the power, or in our case, the data. The consumer, our blender, is basically useless without it. Pretty simple so far. And here it is. This is the magic, the blueprint that defines the exact shape and pin layout for both the plug and the socket. That is the contract. It is the non-negotiable shared understanding that guarantees they will fit together before a single one is ever manufactured. We don't wait until we get home to find out if it fits. We verify against the blueprint from day one. So that's the big idea. It makes sense, right? Now let's see how we take that blueprint and put it into action in our code and, more importantly, in our CI/CD pipelines. Okay, it's really just a 5-step process. First, the consumer team writes tests that spell out exactly what they need. Second, those tests automatically generate that contract file we talked about. Third, the contract gets published to a central place where everyone can see it. Fourth, the provider team grabs that contract and runs it against their actual live service to make sure they're honoring it. And finally, and this is the whole point, if that verification fails, the CI/CD pipeline slams on the brakes and fails the build. Broken contracts do not get deployed. End of story. And you might be wondering, what does one of these contracts actually look like? Well, here you go. It's often just a JSON schema file like this. Now, this isn't just some text file. It's a machine-readable set of rules. You can see it defines the structure, like the property's user ID and name, and their data types. See that required array down at the bottom? That is the consumer literally saying, I will break if I don't get these two fields. This is our formal, agreed-upon blueprint. And this is the other half of the equation. This is the enforcement. This is a test on the provider side. Just look at that last line, matches JSON schema in class path. It's taking the real live response from their API and checking it directly against that contract file. So if a developer on the provider team decides, hey, let's change user ID to a string, this test will instantly fail. It is an automated safety net that stops breaking changes cold. Okay, so the process seems pretty straightforward, right? But this is where knowing a few things from experience can really make a difference. Let's talk about the common traps everyone falls into and the pro tips that'll give you a serious edge. First up, the rookie mistakes. And trust me, pretty much everyone makes these at first. Number one, they still lean way too heavily on slow EDE tests for things CDC could check in milliseconds. Number two, they try to test business logic inside their contract tests. Remember, these tests don't care if a value is correct, only that the structure is correct. And finally, they let the contract drift, where the API changes, but nobody thinks to run the verification against the contract. So what do the top engineers do differently? It comes down to this. First, they mandate contract validation on every single API response. It's not optional. Second, they go all in on tools like Pact to truly decouple their teams and speed everything up. And third,
They don't just run these tests on the side, they build them directly into the pipeline as a hard and fast quality gate. If the contract test fails, the build stops, period.
All right, let's bring this all home. We've covered a lot of ground, but if you only remember a few things from this entire explainer, make it these key points. This is your path to mastering this. Here are your 3 big takeaways. Number 1, decouple to go faster. This whole thing is about replacing those slow, brittle E2E environments with lightning-fast, reliable feedback. Number 2, the workflow is always the same. The consumer defines the rules, the provider verifies them. And number 3, the ultimate goal here is to prevent breaking changes by catching them automatically long before they ever get near production.
And look, I'm not just saying this. This isn't just another testing buzzword. In today's world of distributed systems, this is a fundamental skill. If you truly master this concept, you are legitimately putting yourself ahead of 80% of the other QA engineers out there. It is a massive lever for your career and for your team's velocity.
And since we kept talking about building these checks into our quality gates, it feels only right that our next explainer dives deep into exactly that, integrating automated testing into the CI/CD pipeline. We'll show you the nuts and bolts. See you there.